I'm going to invite my first guest, Winnie Wong from Mastercard, to join us on the stage here, and we'll get started. Winnie, welcome.
Thank you.
You know, I feel like every time I talk to you, it's just on stage. We never chat anymore.
You've been too busy now.
Too busy.
So,
Too busy.
Yeah. But before I start, I want to say that I had just, a lovely cup of the Shivas. So I don't know if what I say afterwards will be coherent. So it's a caveat.
It's free flow, by the way, guys. So just keep going
it's
at
yummy.
it all night. Winnie, welcome to the show, or
Thank you.
Not the show, it's the offline event. I keep mixing my words. For you guys to know, Winnie, country manager of Mastercard for Indochina, including Vietnam. I first met her actually in person on the show. She was the second ever guest. And to this day, her podcast is amongst the top 5 most listened to podcasts on the Vietnam Innovators program. So check it out. It's episode number 2 of the show. And on that program, Winnie was talking a lot about what Mastercard was doing in Vietnam, but most importantly about the world of cashless, what that means exactly. And we'll talk about that today. But to just lead things off really simply, Winnie, what is the number 1 competitor to Mastercard in Vietnam? Your quick answer on that.
My quick answer, the competitor to Mastercard is cash.
Exactly. And I knew that answer.
He knew that.
I was just preempting that. And that sets the tone for today's conversation, not just in this chat, but also for the greater panel that we'll go into today and the industry at scale. Here in Vietnam, how many people are using cash compared to other forms of payment at the moment? What percentage breakdown is that?
So cash is still very, very high in Vietnam, but it has come down. Probably about 3-4 years ago, you will still see 90% of transactions are still cash. With COVID and with the support of the government and the industry, we've seen this come down to about 75% is still cash, but it varies. Online obviously has come down even more. But in the SME sector, some of the B2B sector still remains pretty high. So it's a range, but I would say 70-75% overall is still cash.
Okay. And when Mastercard first came to this market, it's been here forever, but in terms of having a team here, working with the banks, with the fintechs, all of you guys out there, and whoever else is interested in working with Mastercard, some signals probably encouraged Mastercard to expand here, right? Maybe give a little bit of the timeline when that first office opened, perhaps when you arrived. What were some signs that were like, okay, we gotta invest more in Vietnam?
So our office we started without an office probably about 9 years ago. But that's we can't all remember that because we were all too young. But the office really started about 10-ish years ago. And we started growing the business. I came slightly more than 4 years ago, so I've been 4 years here. And we've continued to see the opportunity and the growth in Vietnam, especially in the last few years. And really, the signs are really there. The macroeconomics, the country potential, from very young population, very open, very dynamic population, to high internet penetration, high smartphone usage, really has helped the drive of digital payments or cashless payment as we see it. So we continue to be very, very bullish about Vietnam. Vietnam is our fastest growing country in the region. I'm very proud of that. Still a lot of room to grow. I just mentioned the 70-75% cash. So a lot of conversion that we can look to do and continue to do. So yes, so this remains a very, very huge opportunity for us.
Amazing. And for those of you that are in the audience today, just so you know, of the 120 people that have registered for today's session, more than half are from abroad, actually. It's pretty incredible. This whole event wasn't really marketed until about 2 weeks ago, but as of even this morning, I was getting messages from people like, hey, I'm in town, can I still get a ticket? I'm like, yeah. And there are folks from India, there are folks from Korea here that have fintechs in those countries. And the reason why they're here is because they're wondering, should we expand here? Should we do something here? why Vietnam compared to other markets like Indonesia, the Philippines, and whatnot. So Winnie, that leads me to my question. How does everything from cashless adoption to the fintech landscape compare to other markets in Southeast Asia? Let's just start there. And why should they consider Vietnam first?
So cashless adoption is growing, but honestly does trail some of our neighboring countries. I mean, Singapore comes to mind. But then again, that's probably an anomaly in this region. But again, it's growing and it's growing faster than some of our countries in this region, our peers, so to speak. So definitely this is the place to be. I think the difference here is that there's a lot of willingness. Again, not only of the people I mentioned about young and dynamism, but also the just the feel of the market. I mean, everyone being here, you can feel the vibrancy, the opportunities that are here. So like yourselves, I know we have a lot of partners that are very interested to come in, a lot of banks and fintechs that work with us in other countries that are very, very willing and open to want to come in. So there's huge interest for us here in this part of the world, and definitely in Vietnam, so yes.
Amazing. And offline, this was some months ago, but you were telling me how Mastercard, of course, the banks are huge customers of Mastercard, very loyal and the base of the business. But fintechs are fast emerging, and that's why you're on the panel here today, right? Maybe just paint a super quick picture about where does the fintech industry lie in terms of the strategy for Mastercard? How important is that exactly? If you can quantify anything as well. A little sneaky.
I don't know about quantifying it.
Yeah.
I know that's a very sneaky question. I don't know about quantifying it, but definitely working with fintechs is way up there in our strategy. Let me also clarify, right? So some people may not be very familiar what Mastercard does. So Mastercard, we're really about connecting payee and payer. We're about making transactions, making payments from one party to another in a simple, safe, and secured manner, be it domestic and globally. Now, that's a very long sentence, but what does that mean? It means that we are here to connect and help you make payment safely and securely, right? And you as in fintechs, will be owning the customers, last mile, a lot of strategies that you do. But when it comes into making payment, that's where we would love to partner with fintechs to be able to complete that transaction in a very digital manner. I mean, we've got many, many ways from APIs to different platforms and technologies that we have, and that's why we work a lot with digital banks outside of Vietnam. A lot of fintechs outside of Vietnam, because I don't see that we are competing. In fact, I think we are very, very complementary. We're not here to own the end customer. We are not here to take away your platform. In fact, we are here to augment your platform so that transactions can be done digitally at any time in a very, very secure and safe manner. And I can't stress the secure and safe enough because, again, being online transactions domestically and globally, a lot of things can happen between someone clicks yes to someone receiving it. A lot of people may not know, but we have a lot of checks and balance in between that 2 milliseconds that you get your approval and that you can walk off with the goods. There are like many, many steps and processes and cyber, and all this AI-based technologies, securities that we put on that one transaction. And it is not something that I believe the fintechs will want to replicate. So if they can leverage us on that final transaction, we're happy to look at partnerships and work with fintechs and banks.
Well, you heard it from her. Go find Winnie for a partnership. Mastercard very much is the gold standard of security, I would say, in the payments world, and the startups that are out there in the fintech world. Collaborating with Mastercard is probably one way to get ahead of the game a little bit instead of trying to do it your own. But we'll hear from the other panelists about security too. I know Duc and James and the others have comments about that too from where they stand, and Hui as well. Where are you, Hui? There you are. So my next question, which we talked about partnering with the fintechs and growing the pie together rather than just taking a piece. The objective of Mastercard is to lead a world beyond cash. Cash, we mentioned, is the main competitor here. How soon is this a reality in Vietnam? And maybe you can highlight some of the efforts that Mastercard is doing. We went from 90 to 75%. Is it going to get to that 15% difference? Is it the gap closing even faster for the years to come? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I think the gap will continue to grow, to close, right? To come down even faster. COVID is definitely an accelerator. I think people of all ages now are getting very comfortable to do online transactions, online banking. Even, we used to hear older folks are not comfortable, but today, a lot of people are getting very comfortable in that. Also with technology, and honestly also with more and more fintechs coming into the market, bringing different technologies, bringing different and improved customer experience, I think that's going to accelerate. No one wants to stand in a counter, for 10 minutes trying to pay something. There are a lot of technologies outside of Vietnam that can already, cut short that or even totally remove that. But there are a lot of parties and partners that needs to happen to enable that. For example, cashless cashier, right? Counterless cashier, whatever you call it. You just walk into the shop, pick your goods, and then you walk off. That's already a reality, and we actually have technologies to enable that. But it's not just enough, for us to have that technology. You must have the retail outlet that's ready for that. You must have your back end, your POS system, and so on and so forth, that is all ready for that. Wearables, watches, resort, when you go into a resort, you can have your tags on all these wearables. All these are already reality, right, that we can already bring in today. But it's, again, not just about us. It's about the last mile. It's about all the partners that will enable it in market. So, huge opportunity, but I think that's where I think we need to come in together as an industry of various groups to bring this together.
Are those partners are here in Vietnam already?
Some are.
Extent. Yeah.
Some.
What's limiting them from adopting these? And what could you guys do to help facilitate that adoption? Probably money, cost related, training.
Cost related. Also, it is definitely cost related in the sense that there is change in back end, right? So we are still from the very paper-based to, yes, some more high-end POS, but changing a retail system, for example, is not something you can do overnight, right? There's going to be tests, there's going to be investment, then you're going to make sure that it works, and yada, yada. So there's a lot of things that goes, behind all of that, right? So I think it does take some big movers to make the change, but big movers are also not very fast. So there's a bit of work to be done here.
Got it. What different sectors are involved? You mentioned everything from the POS to the retail. In Vietnam, could you mention maybe a couple players that are moving toward that direction? But you don't have to name drop. Maybe some more specific examples, perhaps, that you've seen this highlighted.
So we are seeing, even the bigger conglomerates are starting to move. A lot of them have formed their own digital arm, building a digital platform, especially with conglomerates that has got, a few lines of businesses. We have seen them wanting to move, and I think some of you may already be working with them. So I see the move, I see the action, but I also feel to some extent that there's also too much noise and too much availability, too much capabilities and availabilities that sometimes it also confuses them on how to move. So I think that's a bit of work that we probably need to come together and find a stamp and then move ahead. But from the large conglomerate, especially to the mid-sized ones, we are seeing willingness to adopt a digital platform and understanding the importance of that. I think that was a key first step. So we are definitely happy with that, but still a lot more work to do.
Yeah, sometimes when I go to your typical coffee shop, you see like 10 QR codes now. I can't keep track of all of them. I'm sure of those 10, let's say, 2 or 3 are really the dominant kind of ones. But how that's going to play out over the next couple years, maybe some comments from you. More the better.
A lot of people in the audience. I think we'll continue to see more coming in these few years. But
you're talking to a few already right now too, I'm sure.
Yes, quite a few. Yeah. So we so a lot are here. more will continue to come. And I think in the next, coming few years, you will see a lot more actions. You mentioned earlier a lot of interest in Vietnam, and that's true. So you see a lot more actions, but it remains to be seen, in the next, 3-5 years, how the market will start to shape, as we are starting to see in other countries. Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, that 75% figure of using cash, assuming it does get to even close to zero, that's so much room to take as part of the pie and grow it. Winnie, can you forecast some types of payments that would be popular? I mean, cashless, world without cash is the primary one, but of all the different types of payment solutions out there, which ones do you think will be the most popular given the dynamics in Vietnam?
Definitely. So I think there's two parts to that, right? So I think the e-wallets, the digital payments, the virtual cards and everything will continue to grow. I think there's still a lot of room to grow. Having said that, there's a lot of interest in alternate forms of payment, crypto, NFTs, and all of this comes into mind. For that, we will have to balance regulation, whatever that is allowed and or not, and also balance risk and controls. Before we jump into the next type of payment, a lot of things have to be taken into consideration. For us, for example, we need to make sure that the forms of payments must be scalable, because we're not talking about one transaction, two transactions, we're talking about trillions of transactions. It must be scalable, it must be stable, meaning if I went to the shop today and I bought a glass of Chivas, when a merchant receives the payment tomorrow, it cannot be half the price because of the volatility, right? There must be stability in the tool. So there's a lot of trial and error. There are a lot of interests. There are a lot of developments that we're seeing. But I think a few of these will have to meet some of these criteria before it can become an everyday payment. So because of that, while there are a lot of interest in alternate payments, I think in the foreseeable future we're still talking about cards-based, QR-based, some of the payment tools that you already know today. But the important part is about scaling it and making it even more seamless. I think the point is going to be in making the consumer experience between using the app, between using your phone, between using your watch to be even better than what it is today. I see that to be more of the shorter term, and shorter as in shorter to mid-term advancements, while the more sexier stuff is being developed.
We've been talking a lot about what businesses can do to adopt technologies and what the banks and fintechs can do. What about the consumers? At the end of the day, they're the ones that they vote with their pocketbook, right? They're the ones that depositing their money into these e-wallets and fintechs and all that to spend their money. What is Mastercard doing to help educate these, typically Gen Z, right? Yes. That's the fastest growing market. They're the ones signing up for all the fintechs nowadays. What are you guys doing to help drive that consumer adoption in fintech?
So honestly, we are doing some, but actually we are actually more working with partners and the end, like the banks and the fintechs. Like I said, because we don't own the consumer, right? So while we can educate and we partner with Vietcetera to do the flavors and drive, cashless or contactless, not cashless. Yeah, it is cashless and contactless for dining experience, for example. But more education actually comes with the partners. Because I don't think it's going to be pure teaching them to use it because they already know. I think most people, and especially like I said with COVID, they already know. But it's how each of the partners between fintechs and banks improve the consumer experience. And so for me, I think it's less of education, but it's more about what other technology that we can bring to empower the banks and fintechs to improve the consumer experience at the end of the day. Today, we have apps, and then we have like, okay, I like something on my messaging app, but then when I talk to the sellers and I say, oh, can you please transfer money? That is a cashless transaction, but it's so disjointed in 2, 3, 4 different platforms or solutions, right? How do we make it in one that, yes, I like it, here, click, done, goods get delivered. So I think that whole consumer journey and experience still needs to be fleshed out. It is not through lack of technology. It is just really, again, the players coming together to make that happen.
Okay. Winnie, I always ask this question at the end of my podcasts with all these guests. I record once a week, so I ask this question a lot. From your perspective, and you're speaking to your customers here, some are your customers, some are your, consumers of Mastercard products. What kind of content and expertise would you like to hear from my podcast in the form of different guests and industries to help inform people more about what's going on in fintech? Like, who would you like to see on the show to help advocate this message more? Perhaps it's some of your customers, perhaps it's some of your partners. Maybe you can highlight some of the partners. You have so many, but if you have a couple to note that are like, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. I didn't know about that. Maybe you can share anything there.
Well, no particular name comes to mind. If you're asking, who I think, can share more experience, I think maybe even reaching to someone outside of Vietnam, where we can hopefully learn from. We've seen a lot of action in Europe, Eastern Europe, and even in some other parts of Asia. I think some of these fintech, some of these fintech turned bank turned fintech, whatever you call it, right? I think that'll be interesting. I think, one area comes to mind is, well, not maybe less so for the audience here, but maybe the audience of the traditional banks, right? How do you compete with fintechs? Mm-hmm. And we've seen some banks regionally done quite successfully. I mean, DBS comes to mind. From a very traditional bank, they've done the DG apps and DG Bank and everything, and and they've been winning awards, right? So what was the journey? How did they start? I think that'll be very interesting for banks. I know we've already been doing some of this series, but I think always a reminder would be interesting. I think from a fintech level, I think actually in Vietnam, maybe even getting, I hate to say this, but maybe getting the regulator or some of these ministry-related people, because I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges of starting a business and grow and thrive, because we do see, periodically regulations that is not very favorable to us growing in this environment. So maybe more dialogue, with the regulators, not just regulators, but the ministries on this. Because on the one hand, they say, I want investment. On the other hand, they go, no, wait, I don't want you to do this. So I think that's if anything, a more open dialogue, like what really do you want?
Right.
I think that'd be more interesting.
Okay, so case studies from regional players. DBS, I would have not known that. Now I'm very curious. I'm going to go Google search that after this. Success story from a big bank going into fintech. And of course, what regulation looks like. How can we have those dialogues with certain partners to make sure that we create an environment favorable for everybody and everyone makes more money? That's a big one, right? So to be seen. Let's see. Winnie, I always like to end also with one other question. Is Mastercard hiring in Vietnam? Some of you, if you're running out of funding, maybe you can work at Mastercard instead. Hopefully not running out of funding.
We don't pay enough to cover everyone. We are growing. My team has been growing. Having said that, I'm probably hiring like a 10th or 100th of what the opportunities are in fintechs. The way we are structured is we are more of a satellite office here. A lot of support comes out of the region, being in Singapore or our tech hub in India or Australia. But yes, we are looking and we'll continue to expand.
Fantastic. Talk to Winnie if you were looking for a partnership for anything else, a job even. Winnie's great. I've known her for a couple of years. She's one of the leaders in the industry, has a lot to share, and her team likewise. So thank you so much, Winnie.
Thank you.
For joining
Thanks, Hao. Always
event.
A pleasure.
Yes,
thank you.
Definitely. It's all good.